Hi, my name's Hillary. My sister once told a room full of people that I didn't deserve anything, not the house, not the me. And they believed her. But what none of them saw were the nights I stayed up turning my parents, washing bedding, calling hospitals she never answered. She mocked me like I was just the one who left. But what if I was the one who stayed, and they just never noticed? Then the lawyer stood up, and everything she thought was hers wasn't. What do you do, Yaid? Would you still stay silent? Or would you let the evidence speak for itself? I arrived at the house just after 10. The air was sharp, the kind that slides down your coat collar and makes you regret leaving the scarf in the car. It was my father's funeral. I parked 2 houses down and walked alone. No one noticed me coming up the steps. The door opened before I could knock. Not by family, by Mrs. Yates, our old neighbor, who still wore pearls to take out the trash. She blinked at me. "Oh, Hillary! I didn't realize you'd made it." I nodded. "Yeah, I did." Inside, the house smelled of cologne and coffee. Low murmurs filled the rooms. Men in dark jackets. Women holding plates of finger food they didn't really want to eat. It was the same furniture, same creaky floorboards I used to sneak across. But nothing felt like mine. Valora was already there, of course. Wearing black, yes, but something tailored and expensive. More Manhattan cocktail hour than Morning Daughter. Her makeup was perfect. Her voice, louder than the rest. She stood in the center of the room like she was hosting a fundraiser, not a funeral. I stood by the coat rack for a moment too long, waiting for someone to offer a word, a nod, even a glance. No one did. So I hung up my coat and stepped into the blur of conversation. Someone touched Valora's arm. "You've done so much for your father. You were always the one holding everything together." She smiled with gentle exhaustion, the kind people wear when they want credit for suffering they never experienced. "It's been hard, but you do what you can for family." I hadn't even made it to the front of the room before I was intercepted. A woman, I think she was a friend of Valora's from some yoga group, gestured at the armchair by the urn. "We've already set that up for Valora." I froze. "I'm his daughter," she blinked. "Oh, I thought Valora was the only one." "Of course." I didn't argue. I stepped aside, found a seat near the hallway, wedged between a ficus and an end table stacked with coasters and unopened mail. Valora cleared her throat and turned to address the room. "Thank you all for coming today. It means so much that you've supported me, us, during this time. It's been a long road. I've been managing things for Dad over the last few years, and your love and kindness really helped carry me." No mention of me. Not even a lie about our family, just I. She continued, graceful as ever. "He was complicated, as we all are, but he loved his people, and he wanted to be remembered with laughter, not tears." Then came the line that would sit with me for years. "I'm just grateful that at least one of his daughters didn't walk away when things got hard." A few heads turned toward me, some quick, some lingering. No one said anything. I stood. I don't even remember deciding to. "I was here," I said. My voice was steady, but the words came out quieter than I expected. "I didn't walk away." Valora didn't miss a beat. "Hillary," she said, with that fake patient tone that meant I was being embarrassing, "this isn't the time." My lips pressed shut before I could even say another word. The silence in the room was thick, polite, oppressive. I sat back down slowly. For the rest of the eulogy, I stared at my hands. I remembered driving Dad to the hospital at 2 a.m., barefoot in January. I remembered signing off on blood tests, arguing with billing offices, learning how to clean bed sores I didn't even know existed. I remembered calling Valora over and over, only to get voicemails, or worse, her assistant. Now here she was, playing saint. And me? I wasn't even given a chair near the urn. I felt my jaw tighten. But I didn't cry. I wouldn't. They could talk about dignity all they wanted. None of them had seen the night he asked me not to leave the room because he was scared of dying alone. None of them had to look him in the eyes and lie, "You're getting better," when we both knew he wasn't. Now I was the outsider. In the house I grew up in the family I never truly belonged to. Valora raised her glass. Yes, an actual glass of white wine, and smiled. As he would have wanted. The room lifted their drinks, and I sat there with nothing. I didn't move from my seat for a long time after they raised their glasses. I just watched the condensation roll down the untouched cup in front of me, listening to the clatter of silverware and surface-level sympathies bouncing around the room like background noise. People started drifting into smaller groups, laughing too quickly, crying too quietly. I stood up eventually, but not because I felt ready. I just didn't want to give Valora the satisfaction of seeing me sit there like a ghost. I slipped into the hallway, away from the noise, where it was quiet enough to hear the house creak. That house had always groaned like it was tired. I leaned against the wall where the wallpaper peeled just slightly behind a family photo Valora had curated. Dad, Mom, and her. My name wasn't even written on the back. The last time this house had felt remotely like home was 4 years earlier, when I got the call about Mom's diagnosis. It was late on a Sunday night, and I remember pacing my apartment in Sacramento, phone pressed so tightly to my ear it left a mark. Dad's voice had trembled. It's advanced, Hillary. They're saying 6 months, maybe less. I told him I'd come up right away. I texted the family group thread before I packed. A simple update. I'm heading to Eureka tonight. Valora responded 3 days later with a thumbs-up emoji. That was it. Not even a period. I got to the hospital just as Mom was being moved to a shared room. I'd expected to be there for a few days, maybe a week. I had packed 2 sweaters, my laptop, and 1 pair of heels in case we needed to meet with an attorney or someone official. I didn't go back to Sacramento for another 15 months. Valora had said she'd handle the insurance paperwork. She even asked me not to get in the way while she talked to their office. Then she ghosted, disappeared, no returned calls, no explanation. I still don't know if she ever filled out any forms. As for Dad, he fell apart slowly. The kind of slow that doesn't show in photos. He'd once been a man who ironed his shirts, even on weekends. Within weeks, he forgot where he kept his razors. Then, he stopped shaving altogether. By the end of Mom's first month home, he was sleeping in the recliner, always facing the hallway, like he was expecting someone to leave or return. I started leaving notes for Valora in the kitchen, updates, bills, test results. None of them ever disappeared. No one read them. It was like writing to a wall. Neighbors would stop by and drop off soup, old DVDs, cards. And slowly, the questions began to shift from, "How's your mom?" to, "Are you staying here now?" I didn't have an answer. I just kept buying more groceries. The day Mom lost her voice completely was the day I quit my job. I didn't even speak to my department head. I just emailed her that I wouldn't be coming back. I said I needed indefinite family leave. She wrote back 2 hours later with 3 words, "Take what you need." I moved into my childhood bedroom. The posters had been gone for years, but the smell lingered. Lemon-scented furniture polish, and something faintly musty, like wet flannel. I scrubbed the windowsills, dusted the corners, and pushed my suitcase under the bed. I never unpacked the heels. The days blurred. Appointments, pharmacy runs, nurse visits, wet towels, clean sheets, heating pads. Dad said, "Thank you," once every 3 days, mostly out of habit. Valora didn't call. Not for birthdays, not for Thanksgiving, not even for Christmas. I missed my best friend's wedding in Portland that year. Didn't tell her why. I just texted her. Something came up. She never asked. I gave up tracking time. I started using a notebook, not with dates, but with small markers. Mom smiled at the cinnamon toast today. Dad asked about the mail. Refilled the morphine drip. One night, I stayed up late scrubbing the bathroom floor. Mom had gotten sick earlier, and Dad had tried to help but ended up making a bigger mess. I didn't get angry. I didn't cry. I just cleaned. On my knees, with gloves 2 sizes too big and a rag that kept slipping from my fingers, I muttered to no one in particular, "This isn't the part they'll remember." And it wasn't. Back in the hallway at the funeral, I stared at the guest book. People had been signing it all morning. I flipped back a few pages until I saw Valora's handwriting, big, swooping, theatrical. "Thanks for letting me be part of the end." I stared at the ink for a few seconds, then picked up the pen. I signed underneath her name, small and steady. I was here the whole time. Then, I closed the book and stepped away. I stepped away from the guest book and made my way into the front parlor. The conversation buzzed low, pockets of people murmuring between bites of catered sandwiches and overfilled glasses. No one looked up as I passed. The room felt too warm, too crowded, even though the windows were open. My Aunt Carla stood near the fireplace with her husband, whispering something behind a napkin. Her eyes flicked toward me, then quickly away. I knew that glance. I'd seen it since I was 12, the kind that sizes you up and decides you're too much trouble to defend. She must have been gone a long time, I overheard someone say behind me. Valora said she only came back this month. That wasn't true, but no one asked me. I caught a glimpse of Mrs. Harrelson, our old piano teacher, and gave her a soft nod. She looked at me like I was a vaguely familiar face she couldn't quite place. Then she turned back toward Valora, who was entertaining a circle of admirers with some anecdote about how hard it had been making all the arrangements. I found myself by the bookshelf, running my fingers over the spines. Some were missing dust jackets now. A few had been turned backwards, titles hidden. That felt like a metaphor. This house used to be loud with Dad's opinions and Mom's humming. Now it was quiet in all the wrong places. I took a breath, then walked back toward the center of the room. I wasn't trying to make a scene. I just needed one person to hear me, to know the truth. I approached a small knot of relatives, my godmother among them. "Excuse me," I said. "I just wanted to say, I was here for all of it." I stayed. When Dad got worse, when the nurses stopped showing up, when the lights had to be kept on, it was me. There was a pause, awkward and thick. My godmother blinked, and one of the cousins gave a polite cough. Valora cut in before anyone could respond. "We all grieve differently," she said with a soft smile. "Let's not make this about guilt." The words hit harder than I expected. It wasn't what she said. It was how easily people accepted it. One of the neighbors nodded. Another woman murmured, "Well, Valora's always been the practical one." I glanced toward Oswin, the family attorney, who stood near the back corner. He avoided my eyes. Of course he did. The legal part hadn't come yet. His silence was strategic. Mine wasn't. I felt heat rise in my chest, but held it back. Arguing wouldn't work here. These people didn't want facts. They wanted the version of the story that made them feel good for showing up with store-bought cookies and hollow condolences. I excused myself quietly and walked down the hallway toward the kitchen. The light above the sink buzzed faintly. I opened the fridge out of habit, though I knew what I'd find: condiments, half a bottle of white wine, and not much else. I poured myself a glass of water from the tap and leaned against the counter, letting the quiet settle again. The room blurred slightly. I wasn't crying. Not really. But that sting behind my eyes, the one that burned when you try to keep your voice even, was there. It brought me back to a different kind of silence. A year before Dad died. Money was tight. Hospice care costs were eating into everything, and insurance was being reevaluated, whatever that meant. I was sitting at the kitchen table, looking at a list of medications and groceries, trying to figure out which one we could skip. I opened Mom's old jewelry drawer. It smelled like lavender and lemon balm, her favorite scents. Inside were a few bangles, a set of earrings missing one post, and the gold pendant she wore every Christmas morning without fail. Oval-shaped, with a tiny opal in the center. I held it in my palm, heavy with meaning. Then I walked it down to Mason's Pawn on 3rd Street. I didn't hesitate. I didn't bargain. I took the cash, came home, bought what Dad needed, and wrapped the pawn receipt in a Kleenex. I stuffed it inside the hollow cookbook in the pantry. I've never opened that book again. They wouldn't understand, I whispered to the empty kitchen. They never saw the receipts. They only saw the silence. Back in the present, I rinsed my glass and set it in the sink. The party noises hadn't reached this part of the house. For a second, it felt like it used to. Quiet, but in a good way. I stepped into the hallway again and saw them. Valora and 3 others standing near the piano, laughing. Someone offered her more wine. She smiled and accepted. I kept walking past them. No one stopped me. I wasn't angry anymore. Not in the loud, shouting way. It had turned into something colder. A wall I'd built, brick by brick, out of every ignored voicemail, every unanswered call, every lie that wore perfume and pearls. I made my way to the kitchen one more time, opened the fridge, still empty. I poured a second glass of water, even though I wasn't thirsty. I drank it standing up. Alone. I stopped expecting warmth in that house a long time ago. I left my empty glass in the sink and walked back into the hallway, just in time to catch a bit of conversation wafting in from the den. I didn't mean to eavesdrop, but when people start rewriting your life out loud, it's hard not to listen. "She handled all the paperwork," someone said, and I recognized the voice, my cousin Trish. She always spoke like she was breaking some big news, even if it was about potato salad. "She even got the hospice set up. The hospital told me Valora was the main contact." I paused near the doorframe, careful not to cast a shadow into the room. "She's always been the responsible one," another voice chimed in. I heard Valora let out a soft, tired laugh, the kind that says, "Well, what choice did I have?" That laugh hit me harder than anything else. She'd weaponized absence and painted it as effort. I wasn't just being erased, I was being replaced. And worse, they were buying it. I moved away before I could hear more, past the stairwell and into the formal dining room, where the table had been cleared but still smelled faintly of lemon oil and old arguments. I sat in the chair closest to the window and closed my eyes for a moment. I wasn't trying to make myself cry. I just needed a second to remember what was real. I went back in my mind to the Thanksgiving 2 years before Dad died. Valora had flown in that morning, breezed into the house in designer boots and a perfectly blown-out hairstyle, hugging people like it was an awards show. I had been in the kitchen for hours, helping Mom chop onions with fingers that were already red from cleaning Dad's feeding tube tray. When I tried to sit at the table, Valora looked at me and said, "Don't sit here. You'll mess up the place cards." I didn't argue. I grabbed my plate and sat on the hallway bench with my back to the coat closet. I ate stuffing off a paper plate, listening to laughter from the dining room. No one noticed I wasn't there. Not even Mom. When someone leaves you out enough times, you stop asking to be included. I didn't know that night that it was the beginning of a much bigger pattern, one that went beyond chairs and place cards. Months before Dad died, I tried to get him into a special care facility that had a waiting list, but offered higher quality treatment than what we could manage at home. I spent hours gathering forms, financial records, letters from his primary doctor. When I showed up for the intake appointment, the administrator glanced at the name on the file and said, "I'm sorry, but you're not listed as the legal point of contact. We'll need confirmation from Valora Kane before we can proceed." I stared at her. "I'm the one who brought him. I live with him." She offered a polite, apologetic shrug. "Unfortunately, the paperwork on file names Valora. Without her signature, we can't move forward." It felt like a punch in the chest. I called Valora, but she didn't answer. Left her a voicemail. No response. Later that evening, I found a yellowed copy of an old medical directive in the back of Dad's file cabinet. It was dated years before his condition worsened, back when Valora still visited on holidays. He'd named her the primary decision-maker, probably assuming she'd step up when needed. She hadn't, but the document was still binding. I remembered asking her once if she would help me update the records. She laughed. "You're better at the emotional stuff. I handle the paperwork." I don't know why that line stuck with me, but it did. Like a jab that kept bruising long after the impact. I spent that night Googling state law and elder care power of attorney clauses, trying to find a loophole. There wasn't one. Not without Dad's signature, and by then, he wasn't lucid enough to give it. So I kept doing what I'd always done. Everything. Without a title, without authority, without backup. That was the moment I stopped waiting for anyone to rescue me from the roles they decided I didn't deserve. Back in the present, I walked toward the front of the house. People were starting to gather again in the living room for whatever passed as a closing moment. Valora stood near the mantel, her arm looped through some cousins like she belonged in a painting. I didn't join them. Instead, I stood near the window, the one that looked out onto the driveway, where the sunlight cut low and sharp through the trees. My reflection was faint in the glass, but I could still see myself. And that was enough. I pulled out my phone, unlocked it, and opened a folder labeled Truth. Inside were photos of bills, screenshots of ignored texts, timestamps of pharmacy pickups, a scan of the pawn receipt from Mom's pendant. I stared at them for a long moment, then locked the screen. I hadn't said a word yet, but I would. Because this time, I wasn't just the one holding the receipts. I was the one who had copies. The room had settled into a hum again, small talk mixed with the soft clinking of wine glasses and forks tapping against half-empty plates. I stayed near the window, watching the sky shift from pale to gray, the light fading behind a line of pines that had stood outside this house longer than I had. That's when I heard the faint scrape of a chair and turned slightly. Oswin Drexler was standing. He hadn't said much all day, just moved from room to room with the quiet weight of someone who knew more than he let on. But the second he rose, a hush passed over the group, like someone had pulled the power from the room. Conversations died mid-sentence. Even Valora paused, her wineglass frozen halfway to her lips. Oswin adjusted his glasses with the same hand that held a slim leather folder. He cleared his throat once, then said calmly, "There is a document your mother left in my care. Her instructions were very specific. It was to remain sealed until a moment like this." The air shifted. I saw Valora's expression flicker, just for a second, before she composed herself. "She was barely coherent in the last few months," Valora said, smiling as if she were making a generous correction. "You know how things get at that stage." Oswin didn't blink. "This letter was written and notarized 6 months before her final decline. I was present. So was the notary. So was your father." That shut her up. He opened the folder slowly, deliberately, the way people open something sacred or dangerous. Inside was a single sheet of folded paper. No envelope. Just the creases of time and the weight of a woman's voice about to echo through a room that had tried too hard to forget her. He held it up slightly. "If Valora is present," he began, reading aloud, "and attempts to minimize, erase, or alter Hillary's role in this family, then this letter is to be read in full." My heart thudded once, hard. Oswin's voice stayed level. "To my daughters," he read, "though I know one of you better than the other now." People started shifting. Chairs creaked. Valora's face hardened, but she said nothing. "Hillary," the letter continued, "you have done what no one saw, but what I always felt. You were here every day. You carried our household with your silence, your steadiness. You made the hard choices without applause." A gasp near the doorway. Someone whispered, "She sold her pendant." Oswin kept reading. "I know what you sacrificed. Your job, your relationships, your health, your hope. I know you pawned my favorite necklace when the account balance hit 0 and Dad needed his prescription." I felt my chest tighten. I'd never told anyone. "Valora," the letter shifted. "You always had presence. You were bold, loud, sharp. You could make people feel seen, and also erased. I trusted you with the paperwork because you asked for it. But trust only stretches so far." Oswin paused briefly, glancing at Valora. She looked down. I cannot force the world to acknowledge what Hillary did, but I can write this. A new kind of silence filled the room now. Not awkward, not pitying. It was the kind that follows when something heavy lands and no one dares move it. Oswin read the last lines. I leave the house to Hillary, not as a gift, not as a prize, but as a recognition of what was already hers by sacrifice. She made this place livable, even when grief made it unbearable. This home remembers her, even if others forget. He folded the letter with care. No one said a word. Valora set her glass down on the side table with a little too much force. A drop of wine sloshed over the rim and hit the carpet. No one reacted. A cousin shifted uncomfortably in their seat. I didn't know, an aunt muttered behind me. Of course they didn't. That was the point. I didn't look at them. I kept my eyes on Oswin. He walked toward me and held out the letter. I took it without speaking. My hands didn't shake. I didn't cry. But I knew what I would say next, and more importantly, what I wouldn't. I glanced at Valora, who was already looking elsewhere, pretending this hadn't just happened, pretending she was still the one with the microphone, the narrative, the final edit. But she wasn't. She'd written me out of the story, but Mom left the original draft. After the crowd dispersed, after the condolences dried up, and the casserole dishes were loaded into trunks, I slipped out the back door. The air was cooler now, a soft wind brushing through the porch lattice. I sat on the old bench Dad built years ago, the one that always leaned slightly left, and listened to the creak of the wind chime Mom hung from the gutter. The door behind me opened gently, and I didn't have to turn to know it was Oswin. He didn't sit, just stood next to me, quiet for a moment, like he was measuring how deep the silence went before breaking it. She'll try to reverse this, he said. His voice wasn't warning or worried. It was just a fact. She always does. I nodded slowly. And I'll be ready this time. He reached into his jacket pocket and handed me a small flash drive, the kind you'd overlook on a desk. I held it between my fingers, feeling its weight, or lack of it. Just in case, he said. Then he motioned back toward the house with his chin. I kept records she thought I deleted. I looked at him. Why? Oswin shrugged slightly, almost embarrassed. Because your mother asked me to, and because you never once asked me to lie for you. He turned and walked back inside without another word. I waited a few minutes, then stood and made my way through the side door. I slipped into the den, closed the door behind me, and plugged the drive into my laptop. It whirred to life like it had been waiting for this exact moment. Inside the folder were PDFs, screenshots, scanned documents. I scrolled through discharge forms, appointment schedules, prescriptions, all bearing my name or initials. And then there it was, a forwarded email from a hospital administrator, dated 9 months ago. We attempted to reach Ms. Valora Kane several times in early February regarding urgent care directives. All calls were unsuccessful. One line was disconnected. The other went to voicemail with a full inbox, documentation attached. Attached were call logs, missed attempts, voicemail screenshots. I exhaled slowly and copied the entire folder onto my own drive, labeling it plainly, Defense, Final. It didn't feel like victory. It felt like air after holding your breath for too long. I closed the laptop, tucked the drive into my pocket, and walked upstairs. The hallway light was dim, half the bulbs flickered now. I passed by the closed door to Dad's room, but stopped just short. I hadn't been in there since before. I rested my hand on the frame, then pushed the door open. It smelled the same, stale fabric softener and old books. The bed was stripped bare. A folded blanket sat on the dresser. I stepped in slowly, letting the room adjust to me. I stood at the side of the bed and ran my fingers across the headboard. And then, uninvited, the memory came back. One of the final nights. He'd been lucid enough to sit up on his own, barely. I had just finished cleaning him up, wiping the corners of his mouth and adjusting the pillows. His skin had been warm, dry, fragile. His eyes half closed, voice soft as breath. I should have told her, "Thank you," he mumbled. I had frozen mid-step, afraid if I moved, the moment would dissolve. "You just did," I whispered back, adjusting the blanket around his legs. He nodded slightly, and a tear rolled down his temple. It was the only one I ever saw. I never told anyone about that night, never mentioned it in arguments, never used it as leverage. It was mine. His, too. Standing in that room now, I didn't feel grief. I felt clarity. I closed the door behind me and went downstairs. It was late. Most of the guests had left. Valora was still somewhere in the house, probably spinning a new version of the day into something digestible, something she could use. I went to the dining table, cleared of plates now, and pulled out a manila folder. I filled it with printed copies of key documents from the drive. Labeled everything with sticky notes, call logs, billing confirmations, a transcript of the voicemail I left Valora on the day of Dad's last emergency room trip. I slipped everything into a folder marked "in case" and placed it beside my purse near the coat rack. I walked to the bathroom mirror and turned on the light. I looked tired. Not defeated. Just tired. This time, I whispered to my reflection, she won't get to rewrite it. The house no longer felt like a tomb. It felt like a courtroom, and this time I had exhibits. The next morning, the kitchen smelled like burnt toast and too many secrets. I came down early, still barefoot, still bracing. The night had offered no sleep, only the kind of restless tossing that comes when your body is tired, but your mind's preparing for war. By the time I walked in, Valora was already at the head of the table, seated like it was a board meeting. Her voice was honeyed and slow, but I caught the edge in her tone before I even saw the stack of paper in front of her. "I really didn't want to bring this up," she said, turning to cousin Jeremy, who just sat down with his plate. "But I'm worried about Hillary, the stress, the grief. It's been affecting her memory." I paused near the coffee pot, one hand still on the cabinet handle. Valora slid the stack of printed emails toward the center of the table. They looked official. Headings bolded. My name stamped at the top in black ink. "She started moving money around toward the end," she continued. "Small amounts at first. It just didn't feel right. I flagged it, but didn't want to cause drama during Dad's final days." An audible gasp from Aunt Linda. Jeremy leaned forward, squinting at the page. Valora's voice dropped to a whisper, but the kind meant to be overheard. "I just think someone should know, just in case she tries to contest anything." I didn't move. I let her finish. I waited until she made eye contact with me, daring me to say something in front of the family. And then I walked over to the dining room hutch, opened the bottom drawer, and pulled out my folder labeled "in case." Without a word, I laid it next to hers. 5 sheets, neatly labeled, time-stamped, highlighted, medical invoices, pharmacy receipts, screenshots of communication logs. I looked around the table and said calmly, "If any of what she's printed checks out over what I have here, I'll leave right now. I'll walk out and never say another word about it." No one moved. Jeremy shifted uncomfortably and pushed Valora's papers aside. "Hillary, these look real. I mean, it's not even close." Valora's expression froze, like she hadn't thought I'd ever speak, like she assumed I'd just fold. "I kept records too," I said, "the kind that don't need asterisks." Oswin appeared from the hallway, coffee in hand, like he'd been waiting for the exact moment to show up. He glanced at my folder, then nodded. "Her files match mine. Date stamps, notarized. I sent her those reports myself." Valora opened her mouth, but no sound came out. I didn't smirk. I didn't gloat. I just picked up the remote control from the coffee table and turned on the TV. "I think we should hear from the one person who isn't here anymore, the one she says she was protecting." The video played. It had been recorded on Oswin's laptop about 2 weeks before Dad passed. The quality wasn't great, grainy, slightly dim, but his voice was clear, He was lying in the hospital bed, propped up with 2 pillows, face pale and sunken. But his eyes, they were focused. "If Valora tries to twist this," he said slowly, "just know. She always had a story. Hillary had the truth." There was a pause. His chest rose and fell like it took all the air in the room to get the next words out. "She took care of everything, quietly. I didn't always say it. God knows I should have. But she gave me dignity when I forgot how to ask for it." The room fell completely silent. Valora reached forward and pressed pause on the video. Her fingers were trembling, but her face was hard. "He wasn't in his right mind when he said that. You know how things get." Oswin set his cup down and spoke evenly. That was one of his last coherent days. We double-checked his cognitive orientation before recording. Silence. No one looked at her. A cousin cleared her throat. Someone else shifted uncomfortably. The weight of the truth had landed, and no one wanted to be underneath it. I stood slowly, picked up my folder, and gathered the pages into a neat stack. No dramatics, no speeches. "I didn't win anything today," I said. "I just didn't let it get stolen again." I walked to the front door. My shoes were waiting by the mat. I opened it, stepped outside into the late morning sun, and closed it behind me. Not with force, not for effect, but with finality. I walked down the steps and into the quiet. I didn't need anyone to follow. If lies are smoke, then truth is flame. And I wasn't done burning yet. 2 weeks passed. The house quieted. The air lightened. I watered Mom's roses every morning, careful not to overdo it. She always said the roots rot faster when you hover. That afternoon, I was in the garden, replanting her favorites into clay pots I'd found in the shed. Dirt beneath my nails, the hum of cicadas in the distance, and just enough breeze to make the wind chime on the porch sing now and then. I hadn't thought of Valora for 3 full days. That was a personal record. Then came the knock. Not the front door. The gate. I stood, wiped my hands on my jeans, and walked over. Valora stood on the other side, one hand gripping the iron frame like she wasn't sure if she was holding it up, or if it was holding her up. She wore a plain shirt, loose pants, no makeup, no earrings. Her eyes looked smaller, less defined without the usual drama she painted into them. "I thought," she began, voice almost apologetic. "I should try again. Say what I didn't." I didn't open the gate. I didn't step forward. "You're here now," I said. "Go ahead." She nodded, bit her lip, looked at the garden behind me, like it might interrupt her. "I didn't know how bad it was," she said. I didn't blink. "I thought you wanted the spotlight, that you needed to feel important." I tilted my head. "That's what you told yourself?" Valora shrugged. "I guess. It just seemed easier than thinking you were doing it, because no one else would." Still, not a real apology. "No, I'm sorry." No acknowledgement of intent, just softened edges around a blade she never really put down. "I missed Mom's final week," she added. "That's on me. I own that." I folded my arms. "You missed more than that." "I know." Silence stretched between us. She shifted her weight. "I was scared," she said. "You've always been the one who sticks. I run." "You rewrite," I corrected gently. She nodded. "That too." I let the gate remain between us. She didn't push it open, and I didn't reach for the latch. "You don't have to forgive me," she offered. I looked down at the potting soil still clinging to my skin. "I already did." Her eyes darted up. That wasn't what she expected. "I forgave you when I stopped needing anything from you," I added. "That was the moment it got quiet enough in my head to let you go." She swallowed. "Then maybe we can—" "No," I said calmly. "We can't. That's not how this ends." She tried again. "But we're sisters. We're 2 women who used to share a roof. That doesn't mean I owe you re-entry." She flinched, not visibly, but enough. "I'm not angry," I said. "I'm just not interested in pretending anymore." She looked toward the porch. "You rebuilt this place," I nodded. And I did it without you. Another pause. She didn't argue. That surprised me. We're not enemies, I added, but we're not family in the way you remember either. Valora nodded. I won't come back. I know. She let go of the gate, turned, and walked away. Her steps were small, deliberate, like she was learning how to walk again. I didn't watch her go. I turned back to the roses, pressed my fingers into the soil, and finished the job I'd started. Later that night, I walked into the living room and placed Mom's restored photo on the mantel. She was younger in it, holding a cup of tea, laughing at something just out of frame. I stared at her for a long moment. Then, I opened the box sitting on the hallway table. Inside was the custom sign I'd ordered 3 weeks ago. I ran my fingers over the carved letters before lifting it out and propping it against the fireplace. Bly Studio, in honor of what was given freely. It wasn't flashy, it wasn't loud, but it was mine. I sat on the couch, still wearing the same jeans from the garden, and let the quiet wrap around me. Not heavy, not sad. Just quiet in the best sense of the word. I didn't win a battle. I didn't reclaim a crown. I didn't need to. She thought forgiveness was a ticket back. She forgot. I was never asking for revenge. I just stopped waiting for permission. The morning sun warmed the brick steps outside my studio. It was quiet, still, the kind of stillness that doesn't ask for attention, just settles in. I had brewed coffee early and left the door slightly open, waiting for the first footsteps. But part of me knew no one was coming early, and I didn't mind. Not anymore. It had been 3 months since I'd last seen Valora. News trickled in, as news tends to do in small towns. A friend of a friend mentioned she'd sold her car. Another told me she'd been spotted working the register at a boutique near downtown. Blouse ironed, smile forced. The kind of job that didn't match the woman she used to pretend to be. No headlines, no big fall from grace, just a quiet unraveling. When someone mentioned her name in passing, I didn't flinch. I didn't smirk. I just said what felt honest. I hope she finds something worth holding on to. That was all. I had stopped expecting a reckoning. What I got instead was something softer, slower, but no less real. Accountability that didn't need an audience. By mid-morning, the gallery had started to fill. Bly Studio wasn't anything fancy. It was 2 rooms, white walls, a creaky floor I hadn't gotten around to fixing, and a hanging sign out front that caught in the wind like a sail. People walked in slowly, respectfully. Not with fanfare, but with curiosity. Locals, old friends of my parents, a few nurses who had cared for Dad. Even Mrs. Yates came, wearing the same pearl earrings she always wore when she wanted to look her version of presentable. The first exhibit was simple. Paintings of moments. Not big, bold scenes. Just corners of the house. Mom's teacup on the windowsill. Dad's slippers half tucked under the recliner. The doorframe where we measured our heights every year, though no one had marked it since I turned 14. A woman stood in front of the canvas, showing the hallway shadows near the bathroom door. Her eyes glassed over. I didn't know this was what you carried, she said. Neither did I. Not until I painted it. Around noon, someone brought in cookies. Another guest offered to donate easels. The whole thing didn't feel like a triumph. It felt like a quiet reunion with the part of myself I'd neglected. When the last guest left, I didn't turn off the lights right away. I walked through the space, letting the silence settle again, but this time it didn't carry the weight of before. I stopped in front of the final piece. It was a blank canvas, framed in gold. No strokes, no texture, just space. The plaque below read, "Unwritten." I had debated adding something to it, a single word, maybe a date, but I'd decided against it. It wasn't missing anything. It was exactly what it needed to be. This was the space I had given up waiting to be seen in. I didn't cry, but when I stood there long enough, my breath caught in that way it does when the air shifts and memory touches the back of your neck. Later that evening, I sat down in the corner of the gallery where I'd set up a desk. Not for business, but for writing. I pulled out my phone and opened the camera, then recorded a short message for the studio's website. I didn't rehearse it. I didn't script it. I just spoke. Sometimes, I began, you won't get the apology. I looked into the lens the way Mom used to look at me when I got home from school, too tired to explain the day. Sometimes, justice doesn't show up in courtrooms or headlines. It doesn't come with fireworks. It comes quietly, through boundaries, through choosing peace. I paused. And peace takes longer. I adjusted the angle a little and leaned in. This place, I continued, is for the people who kept showing up, even when no one saw it, even when they weren't asked, even when it was hard. They showed up anyway. I ended the video there. No flourish, no closing tagline. Just the truth. I uploaded it, scheduled it to go live the next morning, and closed the app. The sun had gone down. I locked the front door of the studio, turned off the lights, and stood in the dark for a moment, just to feel the room without noise, without need. I didn't win a war. I outlasted it. And now I build something it can never tear down.